Good morning, Spanish River. Less than a month ago, while we were out on winter break, our 39th president, Jimmy Carter, passed away at the age of 100. Just imagine all the things he lived through: the wars, the economic booms and busts, the changes in pop culture and the big news. The list is hard to fathom. That life experience led him to be quoted as saying once, quote, "We have become not a melting pot, but a beautiful mosaic. Different people, different beliefs, different yearnings, different hopes, different dreams." I see our schools community becoming more of that very thing, a melting pot, or as Jimmy Carter put it, a mosaic. A mosaic is what we all live in as Americans, as Floridians, and as members of this school's community here in Boca Raton. You, as the sharks that you are, have shown that this community and school thrives in diverse waters. We have been a school over recent years that is an A school for all of our groups, while seeing different demographics grow and new students being introduced to our school all the time. When you begin to diversify and you continue to succeed, that is when the big successes happen. To this point, our Holocaust Remembrance video this year is geared towards reminding of us why it is so important to learn lessons from the Holocaust and what it should mean today. Today we will hear from the legendary Zelda Fuksman, one of the most engaging speakers and Holocaust survivors in our area, talk about her experience during the war. We will also hear from students from the chorus, WSRH, and other groups on campus to explain why these lessons must be taught and learned. We are about to hit 80 years since the first camps were liberated, and so many survivors are leaving us. I hope that you take Zelda's story and the many others you will hear and learn about in your days as a student, and you share them with your children and their children so that these stories and experiences are never forgotten. I want to make sure I say thank you to Ms. Brewer, Mr. Kowalski, Ms. De La Roca, Dr. Castellano, and all the students and others that were part of this project this year. To close, I want to share one more quote by our 39th president that details our very duty as Americans and as the future generations that we need to be to stop genocides and hatred. A strong nation, like a strong person, can afford to be gentle, firm, thoughtful, and restrained. It can afford to extend a helping hand to others. I hope that each of you wake up daily ready to be just that, a hero and a help to others. Thank you.
After nearly 5 years and the systematic murders of nearly 1.1 million people, the deadliest of the Nazi killing centers, Auschwitz-Birkenau, was liberated by the Allies on January 27, 1945. 80 years later, it is possibly more important today than at any other time in history for us to remember the victims and the survivors of the Holocaust, to learn their stories, and to carry on their legacies. It is up to us to keep their memories alive, to continue to raise awareness, and to make sure that humanity never forgets.
Good morning. My name is Zelda Fuksman, and I'm a child survivor of the Holocaust. I'm honored to share my life survival with you, but I want you to know that my sharing is not about me. It is about you. Learning about the Holocaust is not a history lesson. It is a lesson of humanity. That is your obligation to absorb. What kind of person will you be for the future and now? When I was invited to share my survival story, I was a bit apprehensive as to what I, a child survivor, can contribute. And how can I inspire to lead to an understanding what is the Holocaust, what trauma and suffering does to people, and how to heal. It is an important topic because sometimes in our lives, each one of us experiences events that break the heart and sometimes the spirit. I think that one of the lessons is how to be resilient. We had to be. The inertia of surviving gave us the drive to reestablish our own roots without our ancestors. We had no choice. We had and needed to reestablish families that are lost people and we could be proud and who do good. My commitment is to try to instill, whether in students or adults, that each one of us has to live lives accepting the differences in each other, not tolerate. To tolerate is to put somebody aside, make them invisible. Accepting is the way for each one of us to live our lives. If I can make a difference in the attitude and mindset of a student, a teacher, a person, I feel success. We want to build a better world, to appreciate, honor, and celebrate a most important mitzvah, good deed, is charity, not only of funds, but of the heart. I share my life story to hopefully help heal and fix the world, as it is said in Hebrew, tikkun olam. Some of my fellow child survivors, hidden children, because of the compassion, survived by people that had self-sacrifice, non-Jews, who risked their lives and their families. They could have all been killed and their houses burned down. And they saved Jews and children without any rewards. And they were asked, why did you do? It was so dangerous for you to hide Jews. And you know what they said? Because it was the right thing to do. Again, this is my message for you. Do the right thing. You've heard the number 6 million Jews were murdered and 5 million others. So did you ever consider what does 6 million look like? If you read 2,000 names each day, that's a lot of names to read. It'll take you 8 years and 3 months to finish reading 6 million names of mommies and daddies and grandmas and grandpas and cousins and sisters and brothers and babies, innocents. How old are you going to be then after 8 years? Do you see the enormity of the crime? Only about 8% of the Jewish children of all the countries of Europe survived. Let's pretend we're 100 people here, 100 kids. Only 8 of you would have survived. I'm one of the 8%. We must not only to remember the past, but to pledge and commit to fight injustice and protect and keep guard now and for the future for a safer world for all. Just as people were murdered in many ways, so did we survive in many ways. Our members lived through the hell of concentration camps, killing camps, slave labor camps, ghettos, in holes, under a pigsty, in the forest, on the run, Siberia, in Shanghai, under the Japanese, in the ghettos, even in the Philippines.
I believe it is extremely important that we hear the stories and testimonies of Holocaust survivors. Not only do we not want history to repeat itself, but there are such raw emotions and stories from each survivor.
It is very important that we hear survivors' testimonies because true history comes through the ones that lived it. There's one thing between reading a statistic in a book or seeing something online about the true atrocities that occurred, but then there's another thing about hearing the emotions in the person who lived its voice.
And every person's story is so unique to themselves, the feelings and the emotions that they felt. And here's Zelda's story.
This is who is speaking to you. I'm 3.5 years old, was born in Poland. We were citizens of Poland for centuries. This is my family. My mother and my father and my brother Noah, 6 years older, and myself. The Nazis, the Germans, and their collaborators considered Jews subhumans. You just saw people, Jewish faces, subhuman, not worthy of life. This is my family. They loved me. You know what they did? They had posters similar to this in Europe and other countries. These were images of Jews. Now, if you never met a Jew and you would see something like this, would you want to worry about them if they're safe or not? Supposedly they're dirty, they're thieves, they're under the human condition. And the writing says, the Jew is our only enemy. The Jew that never harmed anyone in Europe. He is a deceiver. Never deceived anyone. This is the brainwashing that was done. So in 1939, our part of Poland was taken over by the Soviets, and they brought in a dogma of communism. But we were safe. The hardest part for the population is they brought in atheism. Eventually, in 1941, Hitler decided that he's not going to be a partner with a communist country, and he attacked our part of Poland and Russia. So the elders in the families said to the young people, like my parents and young cousins, get away from here before the German soldiers come, and we'll be okay. But before that, there was bombing of our town and shooting by little airplanes, Messerschmitt, and we had to hide in the forest because a house is a object to bomb, but in the forest there are trees, they didn't know where to bomb. But after a while, we finally were able to get away, and we escaped on the last Russian army train. A little while later, all of a sudden, there was a siren on the train. The train stops, a loud siren that is deafening for a child. Mind you, I'm at that time about 4.5, and so frightening, and announcements, get away from the train, run, hide in the forest. And my daddy carried me. Think of it, that I'm that little child that I showed you in the picture. And we ran in the forest to hide, and after a while, the planes that attacked the train retreated. We returned to the train, and I saw something on the floor, people lying down, something red, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. As a little child, as long as Mommy and Daddy were there with me, I felt safe. And the train took us all the way to the Caucasus and dropped off in a village, and the people came running to see Jews. They heard Jews have horns growing out of their head. And this nonsense happened because of the misinterpretation of the Ten Commandments. And of course, what does horns mean? Bad, devil. We were safe in this village. My parents worked very hard. They were both from small villages, and they were glad to have safety and shelter. And when the harvest was over, my father was taken away to work in the coal mines in Donbass. So we were separated, and we remained in the little village, and my father was away from us. But again, we were safe. In Russia, nobody killed Jews because they were Jews. People died by the thousands that escaped there from a difficult life. In the springtime, the manager from the farm comes to my mother and says, Rivka, I'm going to give you a covered wagon and 2 oxen. The war is getting closer. You're Jewish. It's dangerous for you to remain in this village. You have to leave with your kids. And my mother says, I don't know how to drive oxen, and how will my husband find us? How could I do it? He told her, it's too dangerous for you. I'm going to give you a family to leave the village with you, to drive the oxen for you and get out. And my mother had to, she always used to talk about our survival that she wanted to save the children and accepted to go without waiting for Daddy. But a miracle was that the morning that we were packing the wagon to leave, my father appeared. The coal mines were bombed. Many people got killed or injured. Thankfully, he was okay, but a skeleton. Hard work and not enough nourishment. If you've ever seen bones and skin, that was my daddy. But he took over to drive us away from the war, from the village. So we were 10 people for this wagon. We traveled 3 months, a whole summer, over 600 miles, over fields that they burned the crops. We traveled through deserts that we sometimes had no food, no water, mountains that were so steep that the oxen couldn't even pull the wagon. The men had to push and help our men on our wagon. And let me tell you, we didn't ride in the wagon. We walked over 600 miles barefoot. It was a difficult crossing. Eventually we came to the Caspian Sea, and there they took away our oxen, and all the refugees from Poland that came to that area, they were signed up to work. Eventually a train came for us, brought us to southern Siberia, that's where we were. And they put us on trucks and took us to barracks. And this is where we lived for about 2.5, 3 years. But there was nothing, no food. We had no water. To get water, you had to go to a well a distance away. Our facilities, an outhouse. In the summertime, you didn't want to approach. In the wintertime, it was hard to approach. It was so slippery. And this was a distance away from the barrack. It was a very difficult life. But like I said again, nobody killed Jews because they were Jews. Now, if you said anything against Stalin, who was the president, the leader of Russia at that time, against the government or any management, in the middle of the night, somebody told about that you were saying bad things. And he was taken away in the middle of the night to a more distant Siberia, further north. They refer to it as gulags, never heard from again. They didn't kill people there, but people died from bitter cold and hard work and malnourishment. But we were okay, we were safe. There's a saying in Russian, "Как не работаешь, так не кушай." How you don't work, that's how you don't eat. Children were not provided anything. So if the parents could not provide for the children, they went hungry. And hungry we were, not for lunch or dinner, constant. It got to the point that you weren't even hungry anymore because there was no hope. The war is over, 1945, and Polish citizens were able to return back home. It took us 6 weeks to come back to the first station in Poland. And after traveling for 6 weeks, no bathroom, no water, grab wherever you could when the train stopped. We wanted to get off and use a public bathroom or get water from a faucet. And when we opened our doors of the wagons, we were pelted with stones. There was an ugly, hateful element in Poland. And they greeted us like, "Dirty Jew, go back or go to Palestine." We couldn't go back to our towns, to our families, to see, to our homes. The train took us to a city called Stettin. And we were latecomers. When we arrived there, my father said, "Stay here at the station, and I will find housing for us." So we waited for a couple hours. Finally, he comes back joyful. "Rivka, I found where we're going to stay." And he leads us walking a bombed out building. And my father says, "I'm not going to go and wait in line for a little bit of food. I'm going to get a job." What kind of job can you get in a bombed out city after the war where nothing is available? But they had gangs that were working at bombed out buildings, taking out bricks that weren't damaged or pieces of metal to recycle. And when he told them his name was Moshe Mirmelstein, that's a Jewish sounding name. We don't hire Jews here. This is Poland. After the war, no more Germans there. This was the indicator what is happening there. So he went to another gang where they were working, and he lied about it. He created a Polish name, and they hired him. And of course, he couldn't work hard enough to earn enough zloty, which is the name for dollar in Polish. In the meantime, my mother was very creative. She went to town and found out that there were children's homes, and one of the homes would accept my brother and I, so we didn't have to live in that bombed out building with no facilities, hunger, no washing or anything. And she gave us to the children's home. In this children's home, on the windowsills, we had bricks and bottles of sand that we used at night against the hoodlum element that tried to attack Jewish homes in our home. We were not safe in Poland. When we were in Stettin, this is where we found out that our part of Poland was a testing ground. What will the neighbors do if we kill Jews, the Germans in other words? If they kill the Jews, will the neighbors protect their Jewish population? And most did not. Yes, there were good people that hid Jews and saved them, but not enough. This is where they took the Jewish people. Eventually, some were chosen. The young and intelligentsia were killed right away, so they wouldn't have any kind of protest against the German government. And there were many collaborators that helped them. But eventually, what they did is they took the Jewish men, had them dig long, long ditches in the nearby forests, and walk the Jews, the elderly, they drove with trucks, and a little distance from these pits that they dug, had them undress and line up at the edge of the pits, and they killed them. This is what happened to my family. 1.5 million Jews were murdered in this way, and by starvation, slave labor, cruelty beyond that you can imagine. So when you say, "Oh, people were murdered," it isn't an instant act. It's suffering a day or 2 years. It wasn't an easy way to survive for the people. And this is what happened, and it's called Holocaust by bullet. 1.5 million Jews suffered. And this is my distant cousin, Marcia. She was a few steps removed as a cousin, and she traveled to Israel. She was, at the age of 13, the only survivor out of a pit. She crawled up in the middle of the night. She wasn't killed. She was injured in the leg and naked. And not too far from the pit, she noticed a little farmhouse, crying, and she went there and knocked on their door asking for help. And they took her in, and they saved her. And that's how she survived.
If I had not for myself
We were not safe in Poland. There were attacks all over against the Jews. And that's the truth. That's why very few Jews remained in all the countries of Poland. This is why there are so many Holocaust survivors came to the States, Argentina, Israel, of course, Australia, wherever they would be allowed to come in and get out of Germany. We didn't have any places to remain. There were a few people that did remain, but very, very few. The children's homes took us out of Poland, and you know where we found safety? In Berlin, Germany, the capital where Hitler lived. And we were safe there because the American army was there and the British army. Eventually, a couple of months later, my parents crossed the border too and took us out of the children's home, and we settled in a DP camp. And we settled in a city called Stuttgart. In Stuttgart, I started school at the age of 11. And there was we learned Hebrew, no English. We didn't have an English teacher. Yiddish, and of course German we learned, not in school, but because we lived there. This is where, at the age of 11, 12, and 13, I learned that I'm somebody. I'm not a subhuman. I am like everyone else. This is my inheritance. That's all that's left. We were in the midst of evil that murdered our families, our people, and robbed us of our childhood, which could never be recovered. I place in your hearts and minds a lesson to love. Remember that hate is ugly, it kills. By sharing my heart with each one of you, I hope to instill a responsibility to never forget, to fight for the safety of all people, and fight for a safer world. Each one of us must remember that every human being, regardless of differences, deserves to live a safe and peaceful life. It's called an ethical will. Before I depart from this world and go to my eternal rest, with you, my child, I would like to speak. Come here and listen to me. We taught you quite enough, many good deeds and nice traits. Your heart is good and your mind is keen. My teachings will you certainly observe. There only remains the final hour. Come closer and listen to me. A Jew, my child, have you been born? Remain a Jew well and fine. The name Jew goes back thousands of years, and never be ashamed of. Even when you have reached the highest status, the name Jew shall not embarrass you. Many people disparage this name. Believe me, they are wild morons. The Jewish name is our honor. The name cost us very dearly. It cost terrible edicts and painful plots and suffering, and therefore are we gassed and cremated. Have pity on the wild beasts. We need to educate them in our ethics. Do favors to needy people according to your ability. With a full heart should you give them, and never ask them to what belief they belong. Even the poor gypsy, help him in need. He is a man, a Yiddish word, mensch, and your brother. Give him water and give him bread. I have told you before, and I'm telling you again, be a mensch and understand well that all men are brothers. One God in heaven do they have. You should well remember to remain a mensch meaning a good person, and remain a Jew. And I'm honored to share a piece of my life with you. It's not easy as I get a little older, and the pictures of my families and my memories of pre-war, during the war, and to rebuild life. It is an epic that cannot be translated in speaking for an hour. And as I get older, it's getting a little harder. You honor me. I thank you. And like I began my presentation to you, I shared me, but it's not about me. It is about you. Who are you going to be? What kind of person are you going to be? Who will you vote for? What kind of leader will you be? This is what the lesson of the Holocaust is, that you have power to stop evil to happen wherever you may be. Even today, with your friends, students, bullying, and all of that. So I thank you very much.
I'm Mrs. Brewer. And I'm Mrs. Delarocca. And we want to thank you for your attention during this program and let you know about another event that we have coming up on April 22nd.
WSRH students and Holocaust Studies students teamed up to interview 4 child Holocaust survivors for a national documentary program called Names Not Numbers. And we are excited to premiere these videos on Tuesday, April 22nd.
This will be an evening red carpet event, and we're excited to host it right here in our own theater. Look for specific details coming later in early April.
Thank you again for your attention today.